The wind skinned her back with grit and sun. Clara May crawled on bleeding palms through the cracked bones of the desert, the sky above a flat sheet of merciless blue. Her dress, once white with faint blue trim, hung in tatters. Each breath tasted of copper and dust. She had long since stopped crying. The tears dried 2 days ago. Behind her, somewhere beyond the jagged horizon, smoke curled faintly from what had once been her home, her father's ranch, a spread of 20 cattle, for wind-bent trees, and dreams passed down like heirlooms. The cattle were gone now. So were the men. The smell of scorched wood still clung to her skin. Her right leg dragged uselessly. A boot heel had shattered her knee when she fought back. One of Jeb Moxley's boys, she couldn't tell which, laughed as he did it. Laughed while the others loaded up the herd, kicked her brother's medicine into the fire, and walked off with the last of the water. She'd begged them not to leave her. Not because she wanted mercy. She knew better. But because dying alone in the desert felt like being forgotten twice. Now she moved only by instinct. One arm forward, then the other. Her fingers dug into hot gravel. Lizards scattered as her shadow crept past them. Buzzards circled. She kept going. In the middle of the second night, she hallucinated a lullaby. Her mother's voice, soft as smoke, rose over the hush of wind. It curled around her ears, tugged at her chest like a warm hand. Sleep, little firefly, don't drift too far. Her lips cracked open to sing along, but all that came out was a dry hiss. She closed her eyes. If death had a face, she hoped it looked like her mother. Dawn came cruelly. A pink-gold light spilled across the ridges and painted the sand in false warmth. Clara's body was colder now, though the heat had begun to rise. She smelled water, or dreamed she did. The scent hit her like a slap. Eyes swollen nearly shut, she lifted her head. A mesa loomed in the distance, red stones stacked like giant steps. At its base, a structure squatted low to the ground. Not a shack, not a barn. A house, maybe, with a fence curling around the front. She didn't think. She clawed her way toward it, inch by inch. The sun climbed higher. Shadows shrank. Time lost shape. Near the fence, her fingers brushed something cool. A shallow well or a basin. The metal edge burned her skin, but she clung to it. Just as her vision blurred into a white haze, she saw movement, a shadow behind the screen door. A figure, tall and still. Clara tried to speak. Her tongue wouldn't obey. Then everything fell away. Light, sound, the world. She dreamed of rain. When she woke, it was to a slow creaking and the sharp scent of lavender soap. She lay beneath a cotton blanket, rough against her skin but warm. A single beam of sunlight filtered through the shuttered window beside her. Her arms were wrapped in cloth, and someone had stitched the gash across her thigh with careful hands. A cup of water sat on a stool nearby full. She drank so fast she choked. That's when she saw him. A man sat in the corner of the room, one leg crossed, arms resting calmly in his lap. He wore no hat, and his face was lined deeply, as if carved by years and weather. His eyes were pale gray, watchful but not cold. He said nothing. Clara tensed, her fingers curling beneath the blanket. "Where am I?" she croaked. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached down and slid a small wooden slate across the floor toward her. On it a piece of chalk. Clara stared at it. "You can't talk." He shook his head once. A dozen fears surged through her. A silent man, a hidden place. How had she ended up here? Was this another trap? But his next motion disarmed her. He pointed to the cup of water, then mimed tipping another into his own mouth. He paused, then nodded once, slow and steady, as if to say, "You're safe. For now." Clara slumped back into the bed. Her limbs ached, and her ribs screamed with each breath. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Why'd you help me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, walked out the door, and left her with the quiet. She didn't know his name. She didn't know if he was good or if he just didn't care enough to be bad. But he'd bandaged her wounds, fed her, given her water. And in the silence of that simple room, Clara May felt something strange, not peace. Not yet, but something close enough to make her eyes sting. She lay back and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the wind shifted. The sun climbed higher, and the smell of smoke was finally gone. Clara May spent the first 3 days on that ranch listening to silence. Not an empty silence, but a full one, thick with unsaid things. The man never spoke. He moved with a quiet rhythm, tending to her needs like it was habit. When she woke, there was always water by her bed, sometimes a chipped plate with eggs or beans. When she tried to stand too soon, he gently pressed her back down with one firm hand and tapped the side of his own knee, as if to say, "You'll walk again, but not today." She learned to watch him. He spoke through gestures, nods, the way his shoulders tensed before he turned. He never lingered too long, never made her feel watched. Once, she caught him placing a fresh pair of worn boots at the foot of her bed. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. By the 4th day, Clara limped out of the bunkhouse into the full breadth of the ranch. It was cradled at the base of the mesa like a secret the desert had forgotten. A wide corral held 2 horses and a stubborn mule. A windmill creaked nearby, pulling thin water from a reluctant earth. The soil was poor, the buildings lean, but there was order, a shape to things, as if one man's will alone kept the place from blowing away. He was splitting fence rails when she approached. He didn't look up, just handed her a tin mug of coffee and pointed toward the shade. She sat without protest. Her legs weren't ready to carry her far. After a while, she said, "You live out here alone?" He didn't answer, just nodded once and kept chopping. "You got a name?" The axe paused. He picked up a stub of chalk from the fence post and scratched a name onto the wood. Silas. She read it, then nodded. "Silas, huh? You fight in the war." His jaw flexed just once. He picked up the axe again, struck the wood hard, and the conversation ended. That night, she couldn't sleep. The desert wind murmured against the shutters. She stared at the ceiling and remembered the sounds of her little brother coughing in the dark. Remembered how she couldn't carry him. How the last thing she'd seen before blacking out was Moxley's gang riding off with the herd that was meant to save them. She rose before dawn and hobbled outside. The stars were still out. Silas was already at the barn, feeding the animals. She took the other bucket, ignoring the pain in her side. He didn't stop her, didn't thank her. But the next day, he left a soft leather glove by the feed trough, just her size. Over the next week, they formed a rhythm. She cleaned tack, helped mend the fence, learned where the rain barrel was buried. Silas worked without waste, every motion precise. He never hurried, never seemed surprised by snakes or busted gates or broken stirrups. There was a calm to him, deep and unmoving, like the eye of a storm that never touched the ground. One afternoon, Clara spotted a wild bay mare watching the ranch from a ridge. She pointed it out. Silas squinted at the horse, then shrugged. "I can catch her," Clara said. He gave her a look, half amused, half doubtful. "I said I can," she repeated. "You got rope." A few hours later, she returned dragging the rope behind her, dust in her teeth, arms bruised, and a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there since the day the ranch burned. The mare bucked and screamed, but Clara never let go. Silas just nodded, a slow flicker of approval crossing his face. That night, he carved something small while she stoked the fire. It was a horse, rough, but clearly the same bay mare. He placed it on the table between them. She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. "You're not like the men I grew up around," she said finally. Silas smiled without showing teeth. He mimed closing his mouth with an invisible key, then tossed it into the dark. Clara laughed for the first time in weeks. The next morning, while rummaging through a half-buried chest in the barn, she found something strange. A folded oilcloth, brittle with age, wrapped around old papers. She unrolled one and froze. A wanted poster. Faded ink, but the face was unmistakable. Younger, clean-shaven, the same cold sneer. Jeb Moxley, theft, arson, murder. $300 bounty. Clara felt the blood drain from her limbs. Silas appeared in the doorway, eyes narrowing as he saw the poster in her hands. He didn't rush forward, didn't snatch it. He simply stepped inside, reached out, and gently took it from her. Without meeting her eyes, he walked to the fire pit, struck a match, and fed the paper to the flames. Clara watched it curl into ash. "You knew him?" He didn't answer. You let me come here knowing? Still silence. His face gave nothing away. But there was no apology either. No fear. Clara turned away, her chest tight. That man had slaughtered her family, burned her home, left her to die. And this rancher, this quiet man with calloused hands and war in his past, had known him. Why, she asked, her voice brittle. Why burn it? Silas knelt by the ashes, pressed a flat stone over them, and stood. Then he turned his palms outward, open to her, and waited. It wasn't an answer, but it wasn't a denial either. Clara looked away. She felt the wind rise around them, sweeping dry leaves across the dirt. She wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, "He'll come back." Silas nodded once. Then he walked back into the barn, leaving her alone with the silence. But this time, the silence felt heavier, like something had shifted beneath their feet, something waiting to surface. It began with hoofbeats, slow at first, a distant rhythm echoing off the canyon walls like a funeral drum. Clara was up on the ridge fixing the water line when she heard it. The desert air carried sound far, but this wasn't a trick of the wind. She stood still, shading her eyes. Dust rose on the southern trail. Riders. 4, maybe 5. By the time she limped back to the main house, Silas was already saddling the mule. He moved without panic, but there was steel in his jaw. He handed her a rifle, old, single-shot, cleaned and oiled. "They're coming," she said. He nodded once, his fingers tightening the cinch. "You know who it is." He nodded again. Clara didn't ask how. Some things you feel in your marrow. She dreamed of this day. Sometimes it came with gunfire and justice. Other times it ended with her in the dirt again. She never expected the real version to feel so quiet. The riders appeared just after noon. 5 of them, dust-caked and grinning like hyenas. Jeb Moxley led the pack, his long duster flapping in the wind. His beard had grown wiry, white streaks creeping through the black. But his eyes were the same, sharp, cruel, always searching for something to take. "Well, I'll be damned," he called out, reining in by the fence. "If it ain't little Clara May. Thought I left you for buzzard feed." Clara stood on the porch, rifle in hand. "Guess I don't die easy." Moxley chuckled. "Should have figured. You've got your daddy's stubborn rot in you. Shame he wasted it on dirt and cattle." He dismounted, boots crunching gravel. The others stayed behind, young, twitchy, the kind that shoot without being told. Moxley sauntered toward the house, thumb hooked in his belt, eyes scanning everything. The windmill, the horses, the barn. "Didn't know this place was still running," he said. "Figured the map lied. But here it is, water, grazing land, quiet neighbors. Real tempting." Clara didn't move. "It's not for sale. I ain't here to buy." He smiled, the kind of smile that made wolves back away. "This land's got no title, no owner, not by law." "It's his," Clara said, nodding toward Silas, who stood by the corral, hands loose at his sides. Moxley looked him over. "And who's this mute scarecrow?" "Ranch hand. Husband." Clara said nothing. "Don't much matter," Moxley went on. "Truth is, we been hunting better ground. Took over the Laughlin place last week. Set fire to that preacher's cabin over by Coyote Ridge. Folks don't put up a fight no more. Makes you wonder what happened to the grit in people." Clara tightened her grip on the rifle. "You want it?" she asked. "You'll have to take it." Moxley's smile faded. He looked at her long and slow, then spat in the dirt. "I was hoping you'd say something dumb like that." He turned and gestured to his men. "Search the place. Burn it if you have to. Leave the well." One of the younger men started toward the barn until Silas moved. He didn't shout, didn't warn. He simply stepped in front of the door and raised an arm. The boy hesitated. "You deaf, old man." Silas said nothing. "You best move," the boy snapped. Still nothing. Then the silence cracked like a whip. Silas struck. It happened fast, too fast for the others to react. A shovel swung up from the dirt and cracked across the boy's jaw. He crumpled like dropped laundry. Silas turned, grabbed the rifle from the fallen man's back, and fired a warning shot into the air. Everything froze. Clara raised her own rifle. Her hands didn't shake. Not this time. Moxley's eyes narrowed. You think you can hold this place? No, Clara said, but I think you've bled enough men trying to break women. He laughed bitterly. You think you're some legend? Some ghost come back for revenge? No, she said again. I'm just the one who lived. Moxley's fingers twitched near his holster. Silas raised the stolen rifle, aimed square at Moxley's chest. For a long breath, no one moved. Then Moxley whistled sharply, and the others backed off. Not today, he muttered, stepping back toward his horse. But soon. You can't hold a fence against the tide. Clara lowered her rifle. Then we'll drown standing up. Moxley climbed into the saddle. His smile was gone. Next time, there won't be talk. He turned. The others followed. Dust swallowed them. Clara stood on the porch until they disappeared. When she turned, Silas was already inside, checking ammunition. She sat beside him, shoulders heavy, breath thin. We've got 2 days, maybe 3, she said. He'll come back with more. Silas passed her a shell. His hands were steady. Then he drew on the table with a stub of chalk. We fight. Together. She nodded. The wind blew through the shutters. The sun dipped low behind a mesa. And for the first time in years, Clara felt the shape of something she'd thought was gone. Resolve. Thick and rooted. Not just to survive. To win.